Okay, it's 1 o'clock, so I guess I'll get started. I'd like to welcome everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy in these challenging times. As you know, starting this past spring, the ASC was really dedicated and committed to delivering free educational content on a variety of topics. And today we're sort of continuing that tradition on Webinar Wednesday. And we decided today to sort of tackle something that a lot of cytology fellowship programs are dealing with, which is this move to go to virtual interviews. And for those of you who aren't aware, last May, during the pandemic, the ACGME released guidelines saying that all interviews for trainees should be done in the virtual space, basically to sort of mitigate pandemic-related disruptions. And so a lot of us are dealing with this. And so the members of the ASC Cytopathology Fellowship Program Director Committee, along with a lot of the panelists today, thought this would be a good discussion to have in a panel format to sort of share ideas in a candid way, to see how we're all doing things and how we can maybe do things better. I will say I hope that there are some current cytology fellows or cytotechnologists also on the webinar today, because I think the same rules apply for job interviews. I know in my own program at Geisinger, we actually interviewed and hired a cytotechnologist from cytotechnology school during the pandemic this spring. And so hopefully this content will be applicable to current fellows or cytotechnology students who could potentially be interviewing for jobs in the year coming up. And maybe with the saved sort of costs without having to travel, maybe people are going to prefer this format, and this will be something of the future, and maybe we'll never go back to in-person interviews. So with that, I'll just tell you sort of what we're going to do today. We're going to start off with introductions of our 4 panelists, and they really don't need much introduction. They're pretty well known to our Cytopathology Fellowship Program Director community and the ASC community in general. And then we're going to do some polling questions just to see who our audience is today and how people are tackling different issues related to virtual interviews. Then we'll move on to the panelist discussion, and they're going to talk about how they're approaching interviews in their own programs. And I have some questions for them that were submitted from the website. Then we'll talk about advice for interviewees and potentially people out there who may be interviewing in the virtual space coming up, and what advice our program directors have for them. And then we'll move to a question and answer format. And I will say we're going to try to keep today's discussion to an hour. If you do want to submit questions after the fact, or we don't get to your question today, there's sort of 3 ways you could submit questions. One is via YouTube. If you go to the YouTube site for the discussion, you can also submit a question on the sidebar of the webinar or enter a question in the chat function. And with that, we'll get started. So I'm joined by 4 program directors from various institutions. So one is Dr. Baloch from the University of Pennsylvania. We also have Dr. Barkan from Loyola University. We have Dr. VandenBussche from Johns Hopkins University and Dr. Reynolds from the Cleveland Clinic. And I'm going to start with Dr. Baloch, who can sort of talk about how they're approaching interviews at the University of Pennsylvania. Actually, I think I had polling questions first. Why don't we go to polling questions first, and then we'll go. So Joanne, do you want to start the polls for me?
The poll is launched.
Okay. Can everyone see the question? Okay, so can everyone?
So the poll with the results, you have 37% are cytopathologists that are not fellowship program directors, 30% are program directors, 7% are fellows, 17% are residents, and 10% are cytotechnologists.
So great. So it looks like we have a lot of cytopathologists on today that are probably going to be involved with the interview process. The next question is, has your program started interviewing in the virtual space? yes or no. Okay, so we're almost 50-50 here. It looks like about half of us have started interviews in the virtual space. Okay, so the next poll is how many people do you typically have the applicant meet with on an interview day? Okay, so it looks like the majority of people are having applicants meet with 5 people or more than 5. And the next poll question that we have, do you provide materials or instructions to the applicant prior to the interview day? I will say, I guess a lot of us are getting savvy with audio conferencing now, so maybe they don't need instructions as much, but okay, it sounds like the majority here, so about 60% said yes, they do provide materials. And then the last question is, are you using phone calls without video or video conferencing to conduct your interviews? Okay, so it looks like the vast majority of people are using audio and video conferencing like Zoom or Skype or Teams. And we'll find out from the panelists what each of them is doing. So I'm going to hide the polls now, and I'm going to let each of our panelists discuss how they're approaching virtual interviews at their institution. And we'll start with Dr. Baloch from University of Pennsylvania.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, for inviting me. As you pointed out, this is not somebody, I don't think, at least I can say for myself, I'm not an expert in this. So this was something which had to be done. I had a little bit of experience of virtual interviews before, but that was more at the faculty level, and it was more for a screening process and not like a hiring process. It was just the first to screen the candidates and then invite them physically. We have 3 fellowship spots. I will say this year, we started our interviews early, almost like a month earlier than we usually do. And we had the highest number of applications as compared to the past years. So the amount of applications we got for 3 positions, including our internal candidates, was almost comparable to 2015 or 2014. So we had very high number of applications, and we're receiving applications when we have basically decided who to give this spot to. What we did, like the framework of interviews, we kept the same. We do use Blue Jeans, but now we have Microsoft Teams also. But for most of the interviews, we use the Blue Jeans. We did not have any video that we used for them to look at. There is a video available on our website, which basically describes the whole department. We did send them a link for the interview process. The link was same for the entire interview. The solid interview portion for each candidate was 20 minutes. So it basically was the block of the time was between 20 and 30 minutes. And they also met with the fellows, current fellows in the program. The interviews started like around 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and they met with one of the program directors, the associate program directors, then basically all the cytology faculty. So we did not have any faculty. In the past, we have used SearchPath faculty or other faculty members to join the interview process, but this time we just kept it to all the cytology faculty. So we have 7 faculty members in cytology. Some of us also do SearchPath, and some do just cytology, but they met with all the faculty members. And if in case a faculty member was not available or was busy, we sent them the link again, so they did meet with this faculty, because we use a very specific ranking process, and we do not offer the positions immediately on the spot. Everybody scores, all the candidates, and then we go through those scoring process, comments, and then we offer the fellowship spot. So that's what we have been doing in the past also, so that we kept the framework the same. So the only thing I found was that what I think was worked better for us, that we use the same platform. And as we go through the questions later, I can come back and say that. And keeping the framework the same, the scoring mechanism the same, and kind of basically deciding what we are scoring and what we are looking for. So we kept that to be more unified and the same process. And also, like, when we are going to offer. We did offer all of our spots now. So that was offered, I will say that almost like a month or two earlier than we would have done in the past. Basically, I got kind of addicted to the virtual interviews because I thought that it was kind of easily done. And to be honest, the generation that we are dealing with for this interview process, I felt that they were actually more savvy in that interview process than I personally was. So that's basically describes the framework of our interviews at Penn.
Great. Next is Dr. Barkan.
All right. Well, Dr. Monaco, thank you very much for the invitation to be on this panel here today. Also, thanks for the ASC to provide this to all the program directors and the fellows. We're all in this together. We're all fellowship directors, but none of us are experts in navigating these new conditions and situations. So the idea is maybe we brainstorm and come up with ideas of what are better practices to, take home and use it in our own institutions. Truth of the matter is, maybe blessing in disguise COVID was a blessing in disguise, that we actually kind of went through this, so that we would get to virtual interviews, virtual meetings, and so forth. And maybe this is really here to stay, and this is the way of the future. So we better get used to it and be comfortable with it. So with that, I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to our department, who we have and what we did before, maybe what we made, perhaps a mistake, and then what are we going to do in the future, sort of thing. So in our department, we have 5 faculty, and of the 5 faculty, one of us is our chair, and then we have 4 of us, including myself. We have 1 supervisor cytotechnologist, and 2 other cytotechnologists, and 2 cytoprep technologists. We share our program coordinators with the rest of the fellowship programs, as well as the residency program. So her time is divided, and she is very busy. And we have 2 fellowship positions. So in the past, we've interviewed, anywhere between 4 or 5 or so applicants for the 2 fellowship positions, and then decided, typically maybe 1 or 2 years in advance, depending on the situation, if we have internal applicants. What would be the day in the past of an interview day? How would it go? Of course, there would be the interview with the program directors. How it starts, you first welcome the candidate to the fellowship program, and then that continued with the individual faculty meetings. I would always put the supervisor cytotechnologist to meet with the candidate, so they have an idea about our numbers and know how much work the cytotechnologists are doing. Typically, we did have them sit in the sign out for about maybe half an hour or so, just to get an idea about, what things are, of course, being careful with HIPAA. And then there would be lunch with the cytopathology fellows. And then there would be a wrap up. Thank you for coming, and goodbye with the program director. So now that we went virtual, how did things differ and how did we do things? We first started with doing a group interview, and we did some group interviews, meaning all the faculty got together, or whoever was available got together. So there was like maybe 3 or 4 faculty and the fellow candidate. And then they would have a separate session with the cytopathology fellows. Now, this was a good thing in some ways, because then the the time was much shorter, because if you're meeting with one person with multiple in a group interview setting, you could like narrow it down to maybe like 45 minutes or an hour. What are the other pros for something like this? It was less repetitive for the candidate, because, you know, whenever the candidate comes, we always ask, well, why cytopathology? And they have to answer that why cytopathology multiple times over and over again. And then for the faculty, you know, you would listen to other faculty asking questions and you'd say, well, that's a good question. I wonder what he or she has to say for that. But pro or con would be something like too much pressure on the candidate. Although as cytopathologists, we're all very nice people, we know that. It could be like a whole group is, you know, asking you questions and there's light shining on your forehead and you're sweating bullocks as that's happening. So it could be a bit intimidating for the person, even on a Zoom or a virtual setting. And you don't have the opportunity to rephrase your answer to the question, why cytopathology? Maybe you thought of something else and you're like, oh yeah, that was the answer, but you can't do that. And for faculty, it's difficult to put all faculty in the one timely spot because not everybody is available during that time. You know, it's more time commitment against the 20 minutes versus the 1 hour. And really, in a Zoom setting, you can't have more than 4 or 5 interviews. If anyone has had a Zoom party, knows that after 4 or 5 people on the Zoom, you just either can't get a word in or you can't hear other people and so forth. So it's a little difficult. So we said, okay, let's not do that. Let's maybe go in an individual setting. We haven't done this yet, and this is sort of going forward. What are we going to do? Idea is to have, again, the program director and the individual faculty meeting up with the candidates on Zoom links and giving some time between those so that one, there's no overlapping between the interviews, and 2, the candidate has a little bit of a downtime where they can maybe drink a sip of water or go to the bathroom or take a breather or think, you know, or do whatever they want to do. And we would also have a separate Zoom link for the 2 fellows. And what would be the pro for this? It would be more like a real life interview that we did before. And you can ask the candidate could ask the same question to all the faculty and maybe get the different answers. For instance, in a group interview, if you say, what's the strengths of your program? One faculty answers and everybody else nods, right? As opposed to you can ask the same question to different faculty and everybody might come up with a different answer, which would give a different perspective to the applicant. So that would be better. And of course, less time allotment for each faculty. So these are the ideas. But okay, what are the cons? Cons would be it does require a stable internet connection. We'll go into that later, I'm sure. If you're at home and your internet is sketchy, good luck on that for 3.5, 4 hours. On top of the interview sweat, you're having the, you know, is this Wi-Fi working kind of thing. And then, of course, you see the candidate for a shorter period of time. So these are the thoughts. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go back into a normal interview setting once we are actually going that way. So that's
Dr. Barkan, the stress of a group interviews, it makes me feel like an E-bus Rose, where you've got the surgeon and everybody asking you for a diagnosis. So that is a little stressful, but maybe more appropriate real life setting for cytofellowship. Okay, next we have Dr. VandenBussche from Johns Hopkins.
Hi, yeah, thanks for inviting me, Sarah. This is, it's great to be here. So we have Zoom because Hopkins has an institutional license for us to use, so we're using Zoom. Basically, the time is similar to what we had before, where we have the candidate meet with all the faculty members for about a half-hour time slot. The day starts out with meeting with me for a shorter period of time, about 20 minutes, where I kind of welcome the candidate. You know, make sure that they're settled in okay, kind of explain the day, rehash the day. And then I used to give a brief sort of tour, just kind of like, these are the rooms you'll be in. This is the cytopathology area. But now, because the fellows don't take the candidate to lunch, they don't have as much time to actually show the candidate, give like a similar tour of the area in the hospital. So what I did this time is I would switch Zoom. I would connect over to my iPhone app, and I would use Zoom and basically carry the applicant around into the laboratory and see the cytotech area and actually introduce them to all the different people in the laboratory. So it's not a full tour. They don't get to see different areas of the hospital or the campus, unfortunately, that they would see if they came here and met the fellows during lunch, but at least it gives them a chance to see a little bit of a tour informally. It's just hard to see what they're seeing, so I was kind of concerned that maybe they were angling towards the floor at some point or whatever, but it was the best I could do to start out with the tour, so I thought that was sort of interesting. The candidate still meets with the fellows, so we have 2 fellows, and they meet for about 20 minutes with each fellow individually. We do build in 5-minute breaks between interviews so that the applicant has a chance to rest, and then we give them about 30 minutes for a lunch break that they can eat lunch or do whatever they want during that time. We also have them meet with our lead cytotech for about a half hour as well, and so that kind of is the total of everyone. Sometimes if we have one of our own residents who is already signed up for a fellowship in a preceding year that's upcoming, we have them try to meet with them as well, so to give them as much chance as possible to get different perspectives on from the fellows, because I think the fellows can really talk to them more, give them more honest appraisal of why they entered our program, what they like about our program, and they have different perspectives from each other as well as from the faculty. So I think that's important. They used to have like a good chunk of time, like 2 hours for a lunch break with the fellows, and I think that was something that I wish we could still emulate somehow, because I think it really helps show our program to people, as well as Hopkins and a little bit of Baltimore for people who might not have been here. So I think we sort of lose out on that a little bit. Our GME office is trying to put together a sort of welcome to Baltimore. This is what it's like, because people have different perceptions of the city. And I think sometimes it's not what they expect when they arrive. And unfortunately, I think that wasn't put together in time for a lot of our interviews because they have happened a little bit early this year. We typically don't offer acceptances at the end of the day. Sometimes on rare occasions, we would used to do that. It was an applicant who had rotated with us or an internal applicant. So long as we could get everyone's scoring sheet at the same time, similar to Dr. Baloch, we do have everyone score them in a similar sheet. And so a lot of times with these Zoom calls, I don't have them all collated together in time to really make a decision. Especially Zoom in a way is more efficient. It kind of ends abruptly, and whereas the applicant, when they're visiting, could kind of sit in the sign out room and we could sort of work on something while they're looking at a sign out. With Zoom, it's a little bit hard to find things. You don't want to keep them just waiting in an empty Zoom session for too long. So that's part of the reason behind that, I think. So I think that's basically the summary and some of the comparisons with the other programs.
Chris, it sounds like you need a GoPro for your little interviews where you take your phone around. You need like a ski helmet with the GoPro on top.
With a hat.
Ideas for Christmas.
That's right.
Okay, our next program director is Jordan Reynolds from the Cleveland Clinic.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I think everybody pretty much covered the way most interviews go. Like they may meet with me in the morning. I'll tell them about the program, ask them some interview type questions, and then they'll meet with other faculty throughout the day. A 25-minute interview with 5-minute breaks, and they usually get like a 35-minute lunch period, which is probably better than a lot of us get here. But it's nice for them to just be able to get off the call, stand up, and stretch out. And then they meet with the associate program director at the end of the day. And then again, we also wait for the score sheets to prepare for this and then offer at a later time. Now, I think that it's really interesting. I'm glad that this is happening now as opposed to happening in March. Back in March, I was trying to get my kids up and running for school. And, I got them the basics, but then they've all like mastered the Zoom call. So they've taught me some of the tips and tricks. But unfortunately, since they sometimes use my computer, you have to be careful and make sure that your screen name says Jordan Reynolds and not DJ Boom Kitty or whatever game they're playing that time. I mean, or sometimes they put a goofy picture as their avatar, and then I had to figure out how to use that. But they've taught me how to do that through our Zoom weddings and Zoom birthday parties that we've been attending. So I'm glad that we had some lead time on this. But yeah, I echo what everybody else has said. It's pretty much the same. I enjoy the virtual interviews because you don't have to worry about a candidate walking around your hospital and if they're bored or if they've been left unsupervised, or like, which bathroom are you going to take them to? They're not always in the best condition. At least at home, they can be comfortable there. And I think this is something that we could offer going forward. I mean, people may want to come here, but if they're coming from far away, it might be better for them to save some money. So I think we'll probably have some kind of a hybrid option in the future.
Great.
Jordan, so tell me how you feel about timing has been this interview season. Do you feel that the applicant season and the interview season is skewed earlier because people don't need travel arrangements? Or do you feel like it's later due to sort of pandemic related delays or people having staff to review the applications in-house if people were home, working from home, and how you feel like timing has been this year?
Oh, I think it's been much earlier. I mean, I think, I did my cytology fellowship in 2010 and I found out about it in early February. And, I feel like maybe every year it's been pushed back about a week or two, but there seems to have been a paradigm shift this year where it went back about 4 to 6 weeks. I'll remember in the first 2 weeks of July, several people emailed me and they said, I applied to your program, but I already have offers. What should I do? And then I called some of my friends around that are also program directors and said, are you interviewing people? And they're like, oh yeah, we got going. And I think what usually happens in our program is, I don't even think about looking at the applications until the end of July, and I know more will come in. But in August, you maybe pick 7 or 8 that look pretty good, and then you offer them interviews, you brush your hands and wait for them to make plane tickets sometime throughout September. But since nobody needed to make a plane ticket, they could schedule as soon as they could. So we were interviewing from mid and up until now even. Another issue that has come up is, program directors typically don't take time off at the end of June or the beginning of July so they can onboard everybody. You may take a vacation in August, and many of our staff took a vacation in August. And then I think at many other hospitals, if they were like us, maybe they prohibited you from taking vacation when the shutdowns were here, like from March through May. So many spring breaks got canceled. So I think many people rescheduled their vacations for July and August. So you didn't have that big block of common interviewers that you have in September. You may, like, one of your common interviewers may have had a 1-week vacation in August. So if you really thought that they were vital to the selection process, you may have had to work around that or have them interview different people. So I think this year the main difference is that we are earlier. And because of vacations, I think there's more diversity in the faculty that sees applicants. I would love for all my faculty to see the applicants, but there's 18 teaching faculty, and I don't think that's possible. So you have to pick the people who are willing to help make the selection and who can commit the time to it.
Maybe with virtual interviews, Jordan, you can interview from the beach and you could vacation in July now,
The Cleveland beach, yeah, that may not be the best idea.
Okay, I'm going to ask Dr. VandenBussche the next question. The question is, how do you approach internal and external applicants? Are you standardizing it to do the same thing? Or if you have a good internal resident, are you allowing them to interview in person with appropriate social distancing versus the virtual space?
Yeah, it's interesting. I found it interesting this year. So it was decided for us by Hopkins that all internal candidates would also have to interview in the same way. So by Zoom, they weren't allowed to interview in person to make it fair between internal and external. Even the playing field. I think if that hadn't been done, I mean, I always prefer to have people in person. It just is easier. But having realized that suggestion, I feel like it was probably whoever came up with the idea. It's probably a good suggestion, because I think I would feel as an outside applicant a little bit at a disadvantage if the internal people, they already have an advantage, obviously, because you know them, but then, they're interviewing in person. And I guess it's also the same for people in the same city, right? I mean, potentially if they're just across the road and they could come over, I mean, I guess outside people wouldn't be allowed, but, kind of gives a little bit of advantage potentially. So I could understand that, but it wasn't my personal decision.
I do know that I was talking to a dermatopathologist, and they were doing dermatopathology fellowship interviews in the virtual space, and they were doing it for internal also. And they gave the resident an office next to the program director, and they were worried about microphone interference because they were so physically close, but still interviewing in the virtual space. So I think a lot of people are trying to standardize it, but it's just funny that you have to give your internal people maybe an office to use for the interview, and you could be right near them. Okay, Dr. Barkan, I'm going to ask you a question. Any advice to programs and how to get supplemental materials to recreate an interview day? Should they be reaching out to hospital administration so that the hospital does in promotional stuff for the hospital or for the area like Baltimore? Or should the departments, like pathology departments, make videos selling their department that all residents and trainees can use? Any advice you have about supplemental stuff?
So this is a very good question. An issue boils down to budget and budgetary constraints. Our institution, the GME, reached out to the program directors saying that, we would like to do videos of the institution as well as the individual programs so that you could put it up, which are the sites you want videoed and so forth. So they reached out. Now, we haven't finished them yet. And as Jordan said, that we're actually in the interview season. So maybe for next year, we'll have the videos ready to go. So that is, timing and budget. So not every institution will actually have the budget to have a, Steven Spielberg-like, videoing of the entire physical grounds, including the university, the hospital, shots from above and so forth, and as well as your, institution. So if you don't, let me just run down what are the things you can possibly do. So if you don't have that on hand and you need to record it yourself, Dr. Monaco and Baloch wrote a very nice piece. There are YouTube videos about how to actually do some video recording of the physical grounds. And what are these physical grounds? Places like where you have your sign-out room. Where are you going to sit down? Where are you going to lay your, backpack? Where are the histologists? Where are the cytotechnologists and so forth? Where's the bathroom? Things like that. So what Chris was saying that, he's doing the handheld phone, and I fantasized about that until somebody said, well, what if a patient's passing by and then you record a patient passing by? No, you can't do that. They said so. I said, okay, fine. Although that was a brilliant idea. So you have to be careful with, I suppose, what you record and how you're doing the recording of these physical grounds. But you have to give a understanding for the incoming fellow about where am I going to be in? I mean, think about yourselves. When you're buying a house or when you're renting an apartment, you want to see what are the grounds, where are the rooms. Oh, that room is very sunny. I can see putting my armchair there and reading a book there, kind of thing. So I could see setting my backpack there and this scope looks really good, sort of thing. So yes, you could do the recording yourself, but what if you don't have the equipment to record? Maybe you don't have a, whatever fancy phone, or you don't have a video recorder, or you're uncomfortable doing the technical stuff yourself. Then what you could do is maybe shoot pictures and put it in some sort of a PowerPoint maybe. Like, this is the sign-out room, this is where you're sitting, this is where the cytotechnologist room is, or maybe even provide a map that, this is the room of the sign-out, this is the Rose place, or the Rose is, 2 blocks down the road sort of thing, so that they have an idea about what are these things. I think this is a good idea to give at least a visual understanding of the setting that they're going to be coming in. If all else fails, you can't do anything, at least a description is important. For instance, if I said I am in the same floor as where the resident's room is, across the room, and the Cytopatholog actually are in the room right next to where the cytotechnologists are, that actually gives them an idea about where the physical grounds are. So from, different budgets, different times, different IT, or also if you have an IT person in the, or somebody who is technically savvy person in the department, it's good to ask. You can even ask the residents who are potentially interested in coming into the program, help me do this. So I think that would be kind of my answers to those.
Yeah, that's great. I heard some programs were asking their current fellows or residents to try to film little snapshots or little segments that reflect a day in the life of what they do, with the plan to make a share drive and to somehow combine all those little videos, assuming that there's no patient information on the video and stuff, into some sort of montage video that people could use. But a lot of that will take time, like you said. And I think next year's virtual interviews will probably look very different than this year's look, and we'll be much more prepared. Okay, Dr. Baloch, I have a question for you about what suggestions you have for like best practices for program directors, like anything, pearls of wisdom that you have for people trying to do this, because it sounds like at least half of our audience today maybe hasn't even started this process.
Yes.
And so what kind of advice can you give program directors?
So again, I will say that I'm not an expert in it. For me, this was also a learning process. So I did look in the literature, and there's actually amazingly a lot of businesses, if you go to their website, they have these documents of how to interview. So they're far ahead of us. So you do get a lot of stuff from them. So for me, the first thing which is very important is the technical piece. So you have to be very careful about what kind of technology you'll be using. Any platform that you use, you have to be very familiar with it. So even if you want to share your screen, you want to make sure that the camera is really focused upon you. So it's not like you're rolling your eye and they're just looking at your eye and that happens. I thought that when you are doing your interview, you have to be in a very comfortable position as a program director or as a faculty interviewing a candidate. So I found that if I'm interviewing on an iPhone or on a very small mobile device, it was kind of tough. As compared to sitting in front of a laptop or in front of my desktop computer in my office. I also think that this I really didn't pay much attention to, but then I realized that the background when you're interviewing is very important. If it's very distracting, or if you're at home interviewing a candidate and you have multiple pets, I love pets, so I cannot have my cat or a dog climb on me and share the whole thing. So I think because you have such a limited time, remember you are not looking at somebody in that physical space that you can really, after being in this position for a long time, you could have developed these instincts that behaviorally this person is going to really fit into a program. All of us definitely want somebody who's diagnostically very, very astute, but at the same time, you want somebody that is going to work with you, work with your prep persons, work with your other cytology professionals, because you want that environment. You don't want to be, mentoring your school children for that whole year. So really want somebody who's going to work professionally. So that piece becomes very, very important. So you really have to be focused. So know your technology. Really, when you are, naturally all of us really look at the applications and recommendation letters with a fine-tooth comb, but I think you have to put a little added extra effort to look at those personalized statement that has been in the recommendation letter. So know your technology, focus on the candidates that on the point of view, so to know that this person is also going to work into your program. The other thing I noticed, and which I am also actually guilty of, that when you are setting up a framework for interview process, like an agenda, to apply, to have that downtime between the interviews. So even if somebody logs in a little, like we always say, okay, 5 minutes earlier, I'm interviewing somebody at 12:30, so I'm going to log in at 12:25. That way, you may actually be listening to some of the conversations that are happening, even if you've not used your video, you muted your microscope, you kind of pop up. So if somebody is talking about a question, and I saw this became very important when the candidates were interviewing with our fellows. So, the things like, they're talking about childcare, or they're talking about the area, if there's a places to rent, or what do you feel about the program, so that allowing that 5 or 10 minute downtime between the interviews is very, very, very important. And that kind of allows you for the interviewer to really feel, and if they want to stand up and they're sitting also like this, because you want to be focused on the camera, so that allows them to really stretch. So I think for me, it's the technical part, the screening part, and also making sure that you have this comfort level that you create between the interviewee as well as the interviewer becomes very, very important. And then, as you said, there's going to be a lot of bleed over. That person has talked about, as Güliz said, from the same stuff going on. So those 20 minutes become very important, where you really want to focus and not go through the rhetoric of just saying, again, the same thing over and over again. So those are the things I really learned during this interview process.
And I'm sure you make an effort to clean your office, because I know you're a busy guy and there's probably usually more slide trays in your office. But I'm guessing before an interview now, you clean up a little bit.
And it's because of COVID, I have to wash up everything with Lysol. So.
Okay, so now I thought we would get to sort of advice for interviewees. And like Dr. Baloch mentioned, there's a lot of videos out there about how to crush your virtual interviews and what things to do. So I thought that we would ask each panelist if they have any advice for potential fellows or cytotech students or anyone interviewing this year. And to just kind of make this a little comical, I thought I would kind of quiz the panelists. So these are 3 shots of myself kind of in different ways preparing for potential interviews. So if I was your potential applicant, I have choice A, which is a virtual, like plain, professional, cleared out background. Then I decided to play around with green screens and virtual backgrounds. So choice B is a cell block that maybe you would ask me if it was from an interesting case, or I could describe what I see, or maybe it looks like the cells are coming out of my head like a ponytail. And you can see on the virtual backgrounds, it kind of crops out my dangly earrings. So I look a little different, perhaps. And then choice C is with a diff-quick background. And as I was doing this on my phone, my face popped to the side. And if you're like in or out of the background, it kind of looks like the diff-quick cells are sort of eating my neck or my body, and maybe is distracting to the potential program director. So I'm asking you, if I was your potential applicant, and these were the 3 different options I had for appearing during my virtual interview, which would you choose? That's your first question to answer. And the second question is that some programs, especially for cytotechnology jobs, sometimes they give a slide test. And I know when Geisinger was hiring their cytotechnologists in the virtual space this year, we did not do a slide test for that cytotechnology applicant. So I'm wondering how many of you make an applicant like walk through a case or look at cases or do somewhat of a slide test as an assessment of your morphological skills during the interview day. So you have to choose a background that you prefer, and you need to tell me if you include any sort of morphology, slide test, anything like that. I don't know why Dr. Barkan is laughing, but I'm going to ask her to go first.
I'd take all 3 in a heartbeat. If you applied, I'd take Sara in a heartbeat. Doesn't matter which picture it is. Although I do prefer PEPs, abstain instead of the diff quick, maybe C, probably. No, actually, for the question that you're asking, do we do a slide test? No, we don't do a slide test, but therein is the importance of like having them sit in a sign out setting. And it could be as, simple as, like, what do you see here? Or how would you approach this case? Just in a very colloquial setting, like you would be asking any resident or anybody sitting at the scope at that time, not to quiz the person, just to see if they can actually put two coherent sentences after each other to say something about what you're looking at, but not necessarily a, question, I would say, from my perspective.
Okay, Dr. Baloch, how about you?
So I like the A, because to me that is the least distracting, and I'm really looking at who am I interviewing and as an interview. So for me that is that's the best background. When we used to physically interview, we used to have them sit at our daily cytology conference, which is going over difficult cases, interesting cases, or cases with follow-up. That was we call as morning conference. That was started by Dr. Gupta and it still goes on. So if this happens to be going on next year, I am not going to be the program director next year, but that will be my recommendation to our incoming program director to really use that. At least, so I think it provides that little personalized flair to the program, that how everybody's interacting in that situation and how that is part of the program itself. So I think that is kind of puts the personalized stamp on it. So this year we didn't do it because, as Jordan pointed, it just happened so quickly for all of us, and we all had to just do it. But definitely that will be my recommendation if you're going to be doing this for next year also.
Okay, Dr. Reynolds, how about you? Which background do you prefer, and do you do a morphological assessment or slide test?
I kind of like B. It tells me a couple things. It tells me that you're wealthy enough to afford a phone or a computer that can handle a Zoom background. I know I have an old Mac at home that my kids use and it cannot handle the background. So that means maybe I don't have to worry about you doing my fellowship and eating a lot of peanut butter and spaghetti. Second of all, I must point out that I think you need to take your phone to the Apple store because it went from 74 to 71 within a matter of minutes. So I would watch out for that. And no, we don't do a slide test. If they have a fellowship coming before cytology, then you would be interviewing the beginning of fourth years. Whereas a lot of times, if they don't have another fellowship, you're interviewing the beginning of third year. And, I remember being in residency. It took a long time to learn how to do pathology and cytology. Many of them only have one rotation before they even get to your interview. So I don't expect that they're going to know a lot. And also, I think it's our job to teach them. But I do read the letters very carefully. The letters go on and on about how nice and enthusiastic somebody is, but it doesn't mention anything about their, microscopic skills or their grossing skills. That could be a red flag. So I think you have to dig through the letters. Those become very important. But otherwise, there's no slide test from us.
Okay, Dr. VandenBussche, you need to choose a background and you need to tell me if there's a slide test or morphology assessment.
It's hard for me to vote against Diff Quick, but I would have to vote for A. I agree with Dr. Baloch, it's just less distracting. But I probably, would not hold it against somebody with B or C. It might provide some sort of conversation. But on the whole, I agree, less distraction is better. We don't do a slide test. Occasionally, if the applicant doesn't have to catch a plane, they can sit at the end of the interview day in our QA conference. But I kind of feel like a good way to discuss cytology with an applicant is just to ask them to tell me about one of the more interesting cyto cases they've had as a resident. And that can kind of give me a sense of how well they know cytology or how interested they are in cytology or how well they can discuss it. But it's true that, if someone hasn't done a cytopathology fellowship, they have a year to learn cytopathology. It's most important for us to assess that they're dedicated to cytopathology and completing the fellowship.
Okay, great. So now we'll just go to sort of question and answer. Some of the questions that we got were submitted online. So I think we addressed sort of facility tours, but another question came in about how do you think COVID-19 has impacted the number of applicants and the likelihood of attracting candidates from another state? I don't know if anyone has any. Dr. Baloch?
Yeah, so as I said, I mean, I personally thought that our number of applications were increased and the area that we were covering was wider. Because most of the time in the past, even the applicants applied from different states, it was more like focused from Northeast areas and the kind of Midwest. But here I saw applications from many, many different programs, which I was kind of actually was very happy about and was kind of amazed also. We also had many applications from in-house within the program, residency program. So, one of the reasons somebody said maybe that because the job market, because COVID, there was a hiring freeze. So there was a little bit of a panic, probably because of that. I don't think that was that impactful. It may have impact, but I think it was mostly because also, I think I was getting the applications very earlier. And as Jordan pointed out, I actually even got emails when the application was not even submitted yet, saying, I am submitting an application, what I do need to do. Are you filled? So there was a little bit panic on the applicant side. Personally, I also felt a little panicked because as soon as somebody pointed out to me that they have started offering positions, I got, my God, we really need to set this up. And I actually, in a sense, I'm happy that I did that because we really need to see, we got to see a good variety of candidates from different programs and really hear from the candidates also how they were feeling through this whole process. So actually, I think it was a kind of a two-way street for us personally.
Yeah, I get the sense that a lot of people maybe dived in before they thought they were ready to do this just to get it going because they thought that there was sort of a push and perhaps next year we'll be more prepared. And I also suspect that a lot of residency program directors at your institutions may be reaching out to you guys because their season is just starting. So in a way, the fellowship virtual interviews took off before the resident interviews. And so we didn't really have a lot of experience from interviewing for residency, which is a big interview process, right? And so perhaps you guys are going to be a big, resource or at your own institutions about how to do this. Dr. Barkan, did you have any other comments you wanted to add?
So there's multiple things. I mean, you do see still applicants are coming. We don't have an increased applicant pool this year, but that could be of multiple reasons. Maybe the job markets in the Midwest, that could be that people are still applying for jobs. Or maybe because of COVID, there has been some freezes and people have gone elsewhere. That's another possibility. So it's actually, it's like the stock market. It goes up and down. It changes from year to year, and it's hard to predict. But one thing for sure, I think we're having more and more with COVID or without COVID every year, we're having applicants reach out to us earlier. And if this continues, we're going to be having to look at first-year residents to see if they're eligible for the fellowship program. And perhaps it's time to end that and maybe have a uniform approach to it such that maybe it's only a year out or half a year out or something like that. So this is something for you as the ASC, program director, committee chair, and the program directors to think about what to do going forward.
Any other comments? The next question is about what kind of IT support do you meet with your IT kind of point person before you schedule these interviews? Do you have them on hand when you know you're starting your interview process? And any other instructions you have from the IT perspective?
So I can start. So I think for me, it was a lot more. We do have an IT person, and we were provided a site where I can schedule the interview. But to be honest, this was a lot of self-learning process, and I also learned from my colleagues to, how to because when you go into a full screen, sharing the screens becomes a little problem because you do not have those side things. So, luckily, some of us already did some webinars and stuff, so we knew how to really talk and stuff like that. And one of the things that I'm glad that we were lucky, but what I got from other programs that suddenly the cameras, the video cameras that attached to your computer were scarce. You know, they were you could not find them in the market. So if you did not have a laptop or a monitor with built-in camera, you were out of luck. So this did not happen to us. So we do have an IT person, and then we do have a hospital base that we can, but I will tell you that 99% of the time it was more of a self-learning thing, how to do it. And make sure to, when you talk, you have to have a little bit of a pause because the bandwidth may not be consistent at all the time, and there may be a little bit lagging in the background. So you have to make sure. And I kept on asking my person that I was interviewing that, did I answer your question? Did you hear me correctly? Because I didn't want them, because I speak always fast, so I had to make sure that I kind of paced myself. So I actually had a yellow sticky on my screen saying, pace yourself. So during the interview process, I will look at it. So I think personally, it was more of a self-learning process.
So okay, Dr. Barkan, go ahead.
So, not everybody is lucky having an IT person. We have an IT person who deals with our laboratory information system and not with such things. So this is really all on us. So any of the programs, are in this situation, well, you're not alone. We're all together on this. There's a couple of things I learned and going forward to think about, what to do. For instance, providing a Zoom link or something. I think it's a good idea to do a secure password link. We didn't talk about the different programs. Zoom is one, like Dr. Baloch uses. BlueJean would be another. WebEx is another one that our institution uses. It is very glitchy to my knowledge that whenever I used it during one of the interviews, it kind of broke down and I had to actually send a Zoom link to the candidate and go that way. So you have to look at individual programs, see which one works better. Also, which one do you have access to in your own program? That's, one thing. Also, another idea might be doing a test with the program coordinator, maybe the day before or a week before, to make sure the candidate is actually able to do this wherever they're going to take the call, at home or at work or wherever they are, to make sure it works. Also to have a phone number in handy. Just last week we lost power at home and wireless along with it. So if I had to, do something there, it would have been nicer to have a phone number so you could call and say, I actually lost power. What do I do? So think about the backup plans when things fail. That would be one of the other ideas with IT.
I attended a Zoom etiquette lecture, and somebody said that you should always start your video conference by saying whether the session is recorded or not.
Yes.
So I just was wondering if you guys, as the point people and the program directors, if you're educating your faculty to start by saying, just so you know, this is a conversation between you and me. We're not recording this session. Or if there's any things that you're telling them to or not to do during the Zoom sessions, or do you leave it up to the faculty member?
So I personally, I did not give them the technical stuff, like how, that is a very good point. And I don't even know how to record a session in BlueJean. So, but I think it's that is very, very important, because I was on one of the interview calls with somebody else, and that was brought up that, is this session is not being recorded. I did give them the pointers, send them a document about specifically what to ask and what not to ask. Because I think when you're physically in the same space, it's kind of a different interaction than being on a virtual meeting. So I did give like do's and don'ts of stuff, like, what you can ask and not ask. Because sometimes when there's a lagging and technical difficulty, sometimes the questions and answers may not be perceived 100% that. So I did give a kind of a little cheat sheet, which I know everybody knows, but it's good to just have it again to review. If we think we know everything, sometimes basically when you're in that situation, you may not follow it completely. So I did give that to our faculty.
Go ahead, Güliz.
So that is a very good point, and that was one of the things I was going to say. You can't record anyone without their consent. So it actually is a good idea. I haven't done this, but I think it's a good idea to say that this is not recorded. That said, say for instance for Zoom, you do have the recording capability, but you can also record it without the Zoom. You're on the Zoom call and you could just record what's on your screen. So there's capability for doing that. So ideally, neither the program nor the candidate should do this unless they talk beforehand for educational purposes or something like that. And then they agree to it and then they do it, but they really ought not to do it otherwise.
Jordan and Chris, are you guys providing any training sessions or information for your faculty that are interviewing? Go ahead, Chris.
We're not, but I think it sounds like a really good idea. Like the generic etiquette document would actually, I think, be educational for the faculty. So I think that's a great idea.
And I would say that most of our hardware and software issues have been ironed out early because we started doing instead of in-person consensus conferences and teaching, a lot of it went to Skype or Teams or Zoom. So if anybody sounded like a truck dispatcher before, they can get that. They usually got that taken care of. Like some people were using their dictaphone as a speaker and a microphone, and they put it close to a computer speaker and cause problems. But we were able to iron those things out about a month ago.
Okay, we're about at the 2:00 mark. There's a few things I just wanted to mention before we conclude today. One is that the ASC Cytopathology Program Director Committee is doing an early release of the communicator, and that'll be coming out in a couple of weeks. And that includes an article that Dr. Baloch and I wrote about sort of suggestions for best practices about interviewing in the virtual space. The second educational opportunity coming up is the strategies in cytopathology education at the ASC virtual annual meeting in November. And we actually have a time slot of Sunday morning. So nobody has an excuse that sign out or Rose is interfering with attendance. So I'm hoping we actually have a really good turnout of program directors and cytopathology faculty or trainees. And we're going to incorporate a lot of polling questions because I think it's one of our only chances as program directors to sort of get together on an annual basis and address issues and things to see how other people are attacking things. And the third thing is that because we're ending now, I know there were some questions that came in. If anyone has any additional questions, you can submit them via YouTube, or if you submit them via chat or the question in the webinar, we will, the ASC office will get those to us and we can ask the panelists and then post them. And it's been a pleasure. I think today's been a really helpful session. So hopefully everybody in attendance thought they got something from today, and I hope that the ASC can sort of continue to do these sort of webinars on controversial, challenging topics that we're all addressing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Yes.
Why, thank you.
Thank you.